Hello, this will be part 27 of the series An Ancient Legacy, and now I'd like to drop some of the more important information and show how these connections go back to no less than the Great Pyramid, which in itself is a temple it's a textbook written in stone, and the language in it is proportion and measurement, and we'll examine that. But look, as we've gone through in this last subset, Beauvais Cathedral, the medieval royal foot, how that connects at 144, medieval royal feet 144 being of course so important in all these schools, and that it's at 27.3 and 109.3, that in itself connecting to the allegedly modern foot, and through you could use the pyramidion at the red pyramid, but the Salamis stone as well, which encodes the Doric and Ionic scales, and how that also across across so many ancient sites much earlier than the Parthenon. But of course, the pendulum being one of these key features in regards to these measurement systems and how they encode also measurements of time. And so, for instance, 27.3, so the medieval royal yard here in the center, and how that also connects to the exactly 1 meter, which would define the ideal Egyptian royal cubit, which defines the Great Pyramid ideally. But previous episode also showed how this medieval royal cubit also actually defines a very important, the northeast corner of the pyramid, as where the northwest corner, the pendulum, which arrives from the Indus Valley foot, describes the Great Pyramid, including the sockets, at 86,400 to 1, not 43,200, because from the 86,400 we start to get all this other information, bringing us forward to the modern age. Places such as Astana by Norman Foster, Astana being the newest of the New Jerusalem cities, Washington being the most famous, but Canberra and Brasilia also matching this geometry, this symbolism, the measurements in the major monuments, public buildings along the monumental axis, and even on a legal sense. So for instance, Washington DC, the District of Columbia, it's not a state. Canberra, in the capital of Australia, is in the ACT, Australian Capital Territory, not a state. The Brasilia is the capital of Brazil, and it's in the Federal District, just like the District of Columbia, and even Astana in the Akmola province, having this separate legal status, just like the City of London is essentially a separate city, almost a separate nation within the City of London, in the same way that the Vatican is as well. Now, the plans also can go back to Versailles, and Versailles was the exact same thing, where we saw a separation of the political capital moving to the Palace of Versailles, as to the financial capital being in Paris Centre, just like New York is a financial capital while Washington is a political capital. Almaty in Astana is the financial capital, where Astana is the political capital. Canberra is the political capital of Australia, as where Sydney, maybe Melbourne, they would argue over, but the stock exchange is in Sydney. And that, of course, also in Brasilia, Sao Paulo is the financial capital city, but Brasilia is in the Federal District, is a political capital. So all these cities, it's not just about a couple of pieces of architecture or the city plan. It actually goes much, much deeper into their legal status and even the development of the city. So, for instance, Canberra in Australia now has a pentagonal-shaped defence HQ built sometime after the city matured, just like the Pentagon in Washington built after the city matured. And I'll be willing to bet money that in Brasilia and Astana, once they reach a certain level of maturity, the city plan, that they will also have Pentagon-based defence HQs. But Astana is all over it. We have 273 of even the medieval royal foot. I would say that this is the defining, the secret measure, so to say, in regards to much of the architecture in Astana. We also include the Cremona foot at 273. Again, one of these, I did a whole series, Parthenon, Sanchi Stupa, and how I would say that the Cremona foot represents the Corinthian column. So Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and that the Cremona, which is 7 feet equals 6 Cremona, is the conversion point. But also like the Entertainment Centre there by Norman Foster, again, 273. Within that, that's like the description of it being 150 metres. I'd like to have to the millimetre, because I would be, again, I would say that it's actually 27.333. Although this 27.272727 is significant, especially in regards to the Great Pyramid in itself, at least in the ideal measures. But throughout the series, or just the linking all these ancient sites across the world, all built around 27.3, including the Great Pyramid on the Doric scale as well, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian. The Iron Pillar of Delhi, these very important, very significant temples and stone circles, long barrows. But this continues through to the modern day. So out the front of Buckingham Palace, by one of the defining monuments. Now I wouldn't say countless. There are many others in London, also which you'll find in Paris, but here in Sydney by Edmund Blackett. He's one of these in the know architects. Anything by Edmund Blackett is overloaded with this type of stuff. Again, Taj Mahal, 108 feet, another standard, and also 82 feet the inside as well. 108 feet and 27.3 yards, just like the Taj Mahal, defining features. They're just repeated constantly across the ancient world, across the modern world, and again, major memorials, major pieces of architecture in these very significant cities, which are connected to, it's Jefferson Monument as well. Again, so we have 108 and 273, 82 feet. Twice that is 164, the Korea War Memorial, now even the pond and all these other features. So it's not just one accidental feature. These monuments, these major public buildings, these major memorials include this consistently. Somehow the knowledge is being passed on. Eiffel Tower being another, again, 10800, or for base 410, 273.333. We just see this, even like all the other, literally like every other number is exactly the same, linked to all these other features, and the language being metrology, weights and measures, the language of Thoth and Hermes, the gods of weights and measures, science, engineering, medicine, knowledge. Another classic example. So again, I don't use some random building. I'm talking the major memorial, the major monuments, the major public buildings, the major cathedrals which defined the city, also defined the city plan as well. This is without doubt part of an ancient legacy, a plan which is still in effect to this day. But of course, it's not just about measurement systems, and I've done more than enough to link those together, especially through measurement of time as well. But you also see the Old Kingdom, the copper Deben, and the gold Deben at 13.6 and 27.3. Just like in the Indus Valley, this system carried on through other places, but Minoans would be an example, but also the Greeks, and then the Romans, exactly the same thing. They incorporated into their architecture as well. Done some series in regards to that. We can weigh this, we can measure this, we can be assured that this is a reality, it's a truth. Now, as to the origins, that will come to how open you are to different ideas, because clearly this does not happen as a coincidence. Now, for instance, the weights might be inherited from one society to the next, because they just used the old coins and then they just copied that as a convenience. However, that the weights and measures across time, across cultures, who are apparently unconnected by the official version, are all using these. It's still, like to this day, for instance, the Su, but even to this very 50p piece, 27.3 millimeters, and also 8 grams. This again is just reflected in earlier coins. Now, French Canadians, why would they be? Well, again, because it's part of a much larger integrated system, and it comes back to the wisdom of Thoth, Hermes, or Mercury, the gods of weights and measures. They're carrying the measuring rod, even the angles, and I've again earlier got into that. But it's the symbolism is there, and it's not only the symbolism; it's a vital importance into regards to a civilization, a society, a system of law, a system of trade, science. You need standards, you need and it's so still connected to royalty. So the royals still carry the scepter, and the orb, a symbol of weights and measures, is very, very important. It's also, of course, connected to trade, which is by no means, well, it's essential. Coinage, currency, standards of weights and measure for trade. It's a language. It literally is an international language. Once you have standards, you can speak with your fingers. You can like go to a foreign country and haggle, and you understand just by 2 fingers up, 3 fingers up, and doing a bit of haggling. It's again, this is why maths, geometry, weights and measures are so important. It forms of a basis of a international language, a universal language at some levels as well. But back to the pendulums and 144 Beauvais Cathedral, which is 27.33 ionic, that just again is embedded inside the pendulum. Now 30 degrees is 108,000 seconds of the compass, another connection there as well. And also, geometry, arithmetic, music and astronomy. It's all here. It's all embedded in these systems. It's a beautiful, harmonious system, and coincidence just cannot work. And so this is a review. This is 27.3. Now we're going to look what's up with that. What's going on there? The 29.53 synodic month is one orbit of the Moon around the Earth in relation to the Sun, but the sidereal orbit of 27.321 days is one orbit of the Moon around the Earth in relation to a star. It is a relationship of Earth, Moon and star. Why is this important? Because this is why it carries through so many, not just ancient but also modern esoteric architecture and symbolism, weights and measures. The Moon is 27.3% the size of the Earth. So we have 27.3 days and 27.3%. However, 1 AU is the average distance from the Sun to the Earth. It's a standard AU, astronomical unit, and measured from the centers, the Earth to the Moon at its maximum distance, apogee is 0.00273 AU, once more with 273. However, the Moon does not orbit the Earth around its center because they both have mass. It orbits around what's called the barycenter, which is 27.3% below the surface of the Earth. That's the equivalent of 5,000 kilometers. However, the man on the Moon always faces the Earth. That's because as the Moon orbits around the Earth every 27.32 days, give or take a slight fraction, the Moon rotates on its axis every 27.32 days. 1 moon day equals 1 moon year. That's why the man on the Moon always faces the Earth. However, during this cycle of 27.3 days, on average the Earth will pass through 27 degrees. However, because the elliptical orbits, quite regularly, every 27.3 days, the Earth will travel through 27.3 degrees of the solar arc. And viewed from the Earth, sunspots occur, so one sun day, using a sunspot as measurement, that's 1 sun day equals 27.3 Earth days. And that's a nice little connection, because where do sunspots tend to be the most prominent? And well, that's at 27.3 degrees north and south of the solar equator. So this is just an entry point, but what we have is has Peter Plichka in his book, The Little Book of Coincidence. Well, the coincidences just happen to mount up and up and up, and they connect these very important symbolic references in the old Hermetic artwork still to this day. The importance of Sun, Earth, Moon and stars, and 27.3 is key to these. However, there's a lot more. So we have all these ancient sites, these ancient systems of weights and measure, and the Sun, Earth, Moon and stars being united by this particular number, 27.3. And so that's in degrees, that's in distance, and that's also a measurement of time. And there's, well, of course, just went through those connections. And well, now what else do we have? So we have, of course, the solar system. And this would also incorporate Bode's law. I've done some videos on that. It's very beautiful geometry based again on the vesica, and that describes the position of the planets from the Sun, and again from this very simple but very beautiful geometry and arithmetic. And let's begin. Okay, weights and measures. Hermes, Thoth, Hermes also known as Mercury, as in the element, or as the planet Mercury. And so Mercury and Venus. Now Venus and Mercury, or Hermes and Aphrodite, had a daughter, hermaphroditos, where that's the origin of the word hermaphrodite, as in hermstones, and even the depictions of hermaphroditus is a lady with block and tackle. But so what's the distance from Mercury to Venus? 0.273 AU. 1 AU, or an astronomical unit, is the average distance from the Sun to the Earth, and that connects as well because from Venus to Earth, again, elliptical orbit. So if you tend to do those first page Wikipedia searches, you're not going to get it, but that's condensed information. We have to include elliptical orbit, so they do pass between these points. And it's interesting because in Bode's law, Earth would be described as 1, and 1 astronomical unit is the distance from the Sun to the Earth. So Bode's law blends beautifully with this as well. But then we have the asteroid belt, best known as by the planet series, as in the Ancient Gods series of agriculture, where we get the term cereal from. So that's the main planetoid in the asteroid belt, and that passes through 2.73 AU as well. But then we have, so Jupiter now, it's an elliptical, it's a spheroid. It's not a pure globe, but the circumference, their equatorial circumference, again, there's always, especially with a gas giant, there's always a bit of elasticity in there, but essentially it's coming to 273 miles in circumference. And that will bring us to Saturn, which is tilted at 27.3 degrees, and the rings of Saturn. Now, you could include, now there are these ever so faint rings that were sort of only relatively recently discovered, and only when the sun shone on them, so the rings do extend out further. There's a nice connection in there as well, but the classic rings of Saturn, as we know, are around about 273,600 kilometers wide. Now, this is miles, so circumference of Jupiter in miles, and there are 1.609 kilometers in 1 mile, and so essentially the diameter of the rings of Saturn are at a phi ratio to the circumference of Jupiter. Now, and of course, being 27.3 degree tilt there as well. And well, of course, it's always a lot more. It is really a huge amount more to this. Peter Plichka, Little Book of Coincidence, mentioned some of these as well, so worth mentioning him. Okay, now, since Jupiter is essentially 1/10 of the size of the Sun, the circumference of the Sun, again, it's a big ball of gas, all lumpy, and doesn't have this nice flat surface, or like not a flat surface, but a clear-cut surface between, well, the surface and the atmosphere. But again, so it is passing through 2,730,000 miles as well. But now the Sun and the Earth, we've already seen connections between Sun, Earth, Moon in 27.3. Well, if we look at the density of the Sun, again, sort of on best available evidence, so so some will have it around about 27.6 average ratio, so that's within this 1.3 from the average, because there are different densities there, but that would pretty much bring it into a density of the Sun being 27.3% as dense as the Earth. And well, it goes on. So the surface gravity of the Sun, and this is important because often, yeah, there's a whole thing there, but again, it's 2.73 ratio between the Sun and the Earth again, and again, that's within this 1.3 average, 1.3% average, which also just happens to describe the elemental composition of the Sun being 27.3% heavier than hydrogen, within 1.3% as well, just out of pure coinkydinky. Now, the internal temperature of the Sun, again, that's based on best current available. Now, there's but still, there's pretty good, science for it, well, yeah, if you're in, but what we have is an approximate of 1,500,000 degrees C, which converts to 27.2273 on the Fahrenheit scale, again within this very small, essentially it's the same margin there as well, which is another little telling part. Now it's also interesting to note that, so now we're talking temperature, now Celsius and Kelvin. Now there's a whole bunch of stuff in here as well, so at 40 degrees there is this sweet spot where they're all at minus 40, they all merge together, but that's something else. But so water boils at 0 degrees C. It used to be 30 on the Newtonian scale, it would be 33, but 32 there. And on the Newtonian scale, that's 200, so Celsius, water freezes at surface temperature at 0, and we have 273.15 K. As we're absolute 0, where everything freezes, that's 0 Kelvin, is negative 273.15 degrees Celsius. Now that's an interesting point because the surface temperature of the Sun and the Earth at a 1 to 273 ratio. Now the average global temperature, which includes the Antarctic regions, that is a little bit lower. I'm talking about the equatorial surface because the bulk of the Earth, now the Antarctic regions pose an extreme, but again, surface temperature of the Earth is about as political as you can get. So even researching it is like a minefield. But so 20 degrees Celsius is 273. Well, again, within this very narrow band, the temperature of the Sun. Now, of course, what's the temperature in space? Space isn't an absolute vacuum. Otherwise, it would be 0 Kelvin. It's at 2.73 Kelvin. So temperature is a measure, same just like length and just like time. Now we also have the Sun and the Earth, back to there. So the volume, it's at a ratio of 1,273,000 to 1. So that's three-dimensional volume, and that's that's a good description of the area in geometry and how this number will bring us there. So if the area of a circle is 1, then the square will be 1.273 if it's in a circle inside of a square. So 27.3% again, which again earlier videos I showed the ratio of volume between a sphere and a cube, describing the Royal Egyptian cube in meters, and how that's also a proportion built into the pyramid as well. Good old vesica, the basic fundamental, let's just call it sacred geometry, but really just say geometry, and that in itself has this 273 ratio as well, 2.73, 2.73, and we see these same, again, just to shift the decimal place. More geometry. Now, Avogadro's constant, which is, well, it's a constant, so just like phi and pi and Euler's and these other numbers, which are, constants, literally since the beginning they've been a constant, and that's why they're so important. That's why they're built. All these constants are built into the Great Pyramid. But okay, Euler's constant, okay, a pound, so basically it's how many atoms or molecules are in 1 pound, and that would be 2.7315, 273.15, the thermometer. And where we see it in Avogadro's constant, which is, now that's per pound, and for those into their measures, a pound's a pound all the world around, connects to the pendulum, and even the, if you look into your pounds and pints, what are you going to get? Well, you're going to get vesica numbers, and again, 3.73, 4.73, which is essentially it's the vesica and the same proportions that are coming out of it. What's more, we have Charles's law. So heated ideal gases expand at 1/273 per unit of temperature, and that's a cool thing, because how do you work out the speed of sound? Different temperatures, the density change, the different factors in the air, and that will actually change the speed of sound. And how do we work it out? 273. So we're seeing physics and chemistry and geometry and arithmetic and astronomy and these systems of weights and measures. Now, you could also incorporate this as music, because what's the music of the Earth? Well, that's sort of from the Schumann resonance, where lightning striking the Earth, the Earth's getting impacted and it rings like a bell. I saw David Icke talking about this, and God, that guy just, yeah. Anyway, but he was talking about the moon and all this hollowness from hollow-headed stuff. But 27.3 hertz of Schumann resonance. Now there's also a 27.3 day cycle of lightning at the equator, which is an interesting point, because if we consider, we'll go to the next one. Close that for the moment, and we have this atmospheric tide. So the pressure of within the atmosphere works on a 13.6 27.3 day cycle as well. Now these are all public, like the description will be one long set of links, but you can of course go and double check and fact check everything you hear. As Abraham Lincoln famously said, not everything you read on the internet is true. And okay, now in regards to fertility as well, so from conception to birth, not now usually the 40 week is measured from the last period to birth, but from conception to birth, that's 273 days, or 10 synodic months. And of course the menstrual cycle, most commonly referred to as a 28-day cycle, well, the mean average is 27.3 to 30.1 days. Now that would describe the synodic month and the sidereal month, but also the 28th day, that's every 27.3 days. So we're seeing human fertility cycles just happen to harmonize with this as well. And while we're on 27.3 days as well, the heliospheric current, 27.3 days as well. So why are ancient weights and measure systems just happen to, in a beautiful symphony of extraordinary coincidence, just happen to fall on 27.3? Well, I'll leave that up to you, but given the amount of knowledge Greeks and Romans had, and the evidence in the archaeoastronomy, such as in the Great Pyramid, a lot, like for instance the shadow and the equinox is called an accident that the pyramid settled, and it just, again, this is like, seriously, this is what they say, I'm not making this up, that it settled, that the 8-sided pyramid occurred because the pyramid it cracked because it settled, and it just happened to crack at 90 degrees from each other in a straight line across all 4 sides. I kid you not, that's what one of the explanations is for it. So weights and measure systems, and of course there's still a lot more, but just got to pause a moment. Anyway, so we have 27.3 to 73.33 built across ancient structures, these iconic and very important ones from the Indus to Old Kingdom Egypt in the Great Pyramid as well, but all the way up to the modern era. And I also have a Great Pyramid. Now Doric, Ionic and Corinthian, it just happens to be, now one rod is half of a chain, or a perch is one half of a chain. Well, that's 27.33523 Doric rods is the height of the Great Pyramid. But if we, well, the angle of the Great Pyramid, just like the circle and the square, which we mentioned earlier, and is 4 over pi ratio, 1.273. That just happens using some lovely trig, and that just happens to match the angle of the pyramid again. So, and the ratio itself, so the height to the half base on the western side incorporates that same proportion, which would also describe the size of the Earth in regards to the Moon, amongst so many other things. Now the Doric rod, and now one rod or a perch is half of a chain, and the Gunther's chain of 66 feet from this very Hermetic period, which was a rebirth really of older systems. 66 feet is one chain, 66 feet equals 60 Indus or Sumerian feet or Saxon feet, 100 links per chain, and well, again, whether it's links or chain 273.4, and well, 66 feet equals 792 inches, and that in itself is a huge thing. I've done a video, Hermetic rule of a chain, and it's sun, earth, moon, and stars all over again, just like 273. All these numbers in the infinite sea of numbers just happen to come back and describe sun, earth, moon, and stars, geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. Or just a coincidence, of course. Now, every 2,737 years. Now, there's this other CGI picture, but this is what the actual planets would look like from the southeast of Giza. That's the ecliptic, so that's the constellations, zodiac line. If you inverse it, as above, so below, we drop it down, and we see that they match Mercury, Venus, and Saturn. And it was basically mirroring Orion's belt as well, which is the shafts in the Great Pyramid. One of them points to Orion, the other to Sirius, and well, Mercury, Venus, and Saturn, Mercury, and Venus, 273. Gaussian blur. So in computing. So Gaussian blur is a way to blur an image. Now that might not sound like much, but it's actually, it's a little bit more complex than what you might think, because if you blur an image, how do you get it blurred properly? It just turn into a grey soup, if you just sort of do it in a random way. Well, Gaussian blur is based on this it's sum of the value of the masks is 273. There's the code. 273. Now, the interesting thing about Gaussian blur is it's probably the best way to de-blur images, even images that were blurred not using this particular method. So de-blurring an image it's a bit like how they a bit like fractals and how they got this magic property virtually, in inverted commas magic, but again 273 to blur an image, which is a lot more complicated, to blur an image without losing it and just making it a grey soup. But also to de-blur images, including ones that, so it's not just it's like imagine like an antidote. Now, this is like an antidote that works on other poisons, not just the original one as well, which is quite interesting. So again, in this computing world, now the phi spiral, the Nautilus spiral Fibonacci sequence being again connection to phi, and so the one-dimensional, so the line to the line, so the length to the height of each rectangle will get closer and closer to a phi ratio as we go along. But in the second dimension, the area of each rectangle to the next one will be at phi squared, which is 1/2 of an Egyptian royal cubit over 10. But anyway, now what's that? Because so Fibonacci number's 13 times 21, so 273 again, and this would bring us to a phi plus 1 or phi squared ratio of area within the Fibonacci spiral. But also it's interesting in prime numbers, because we have these things called sphenic numbers, multiple of 3 alternate primes, and 273 is just happens to be the of the first 3 alternate primes. Now 2 is a prime. You could even maybe argue 1 is a prime, but like 1 and 2 is the only odd prime, so 2 stands out. So that's that it's 3, 7, 13 I think is interesting as well, and that it basically, again, these 3 numbers, again, we're coming back to 13, so 3 times 7 is 21. So again, it's matching this phi type properties from the Fibonacci numbers, which in itself is a nice link. That's 27.33333, and brings us back to the pendulum, because again the socle. Now the granite on the roof of the king's chamber is 80. Now again, so it would be 10 times this, so that you could use that as well. Now I'm still a little bit iffy about the exact measurements now. Multiple sources would give me 18.04 feet as well. So you could also, that's describing the roof the stones on the roof of the king's or the upper chamber as well, so that could be included. But it's worth bringing back in this pendulum because the Royal Egyptian cubit, which would be defined by a 1 meter pendulum, 0.5236, half of that is that would equal phi plus 1 over 10, or phi squared over 10, within 0.0004 of that there. But so the meter and the Royal Egyptian cubit and the pendulum, so we draw the straight line across to create that isosceles triangle. Now that right angle, okay, that's 2.734. What do we get there? 2.734, 033, 033. Same number popping up right there. Again, all coincidence, I'm sure, though. But back to 2.7333. So the medieval royal foot, and 144 of those, as in Beauvais Cathedral, 27.33333, and 109.333, which is 1.09333 feet. One medieval royal foot, so it's the same number. Conversion rate, it's just a shift a decimal point. Anyway, the medieval royal foot, the pendulum it creates, it's slightly less. So medieval royal yard is a fraction less than 1 meter, and that. But even this cubit, defined by this pendulum, also describes the actual measurements of the Great Pyramid looking from the northeast corner, not using ideal measurements on the actual survey there. And we just see again another piece, another portion of the extraordinary symphony of coincidence as it carries on. And so 109.333, 27.33. Now 27.3 times 2 would be 109. Anyway, but what I mean by that is this. So I often refer to it myself, and it is a nice thing, but so if you multiply the diameter of a sun by 108, you get very, very close. You actually do describe the distance of the sun to the Earth within the sort of middle part. And if you do this, if you multiply the size of the Earth by 108, you get the diameter of the sun. And again, that is true within, but 109.2, or this, you could even incorporate 109.33333. I've just sort of rounded it off there just to be make the graphic a bit simpler. But these numbers, 27.333, 109.333. Sun, Earth, and Moon unity point, because the circumference of the Sun, based like on Cassini, on the best, again that would bring it right in this sort of sweet spot of 2,734,000. Again, within less than 1%, which is the same number. It's the same. Within this very narrow band. Think of it more like a wave and an exact value, a bit like the Fibonacci spiral, but. Again, I'll do more in the future because I've honed in on what I consider the precise value, but I'm restricted to working on the available data and whether it's the weights and measures of ancient temples, modern ones. You're sort of stuck to the best available information. But the size of the sun is 400 times larger than the size of the moon. But the moon is 400 times closer to the Earth, and that's why in the eclipse it looks like the sun and the moon are exactly the same size. It's as best we know, it only happens on Earth. The size of the moon compared to its distance to the Earth is very unusual. Again to it's a bit like Phobos. It sort of stands out as this very special, freaky sort of thing. But it's also 10,920. Kilometer circumference, 109.2. But so 400 in size and 400 in distance is this number that describes the distance of the sun and the ratio of distance from the Earth to the moon, or the Earth to the sun. So 400. Now the moon is 27.3% the size of the Earth, so 400 times 0.273, or what is 27.3% of 400? It's 109.2, and if you multiply the diameter of the Earth times 109.2, you get the diameter of the Sun.
if you multiply the diameter of the sun by 109.2, you get the distance from the sun to the earth. These things bleed into one another. Why are they built into all these? Any temple that's got 27.3 into it has 109.2, and archaeoastronomy and all these other, again, this is a short piece. It just really carries on. Again, you can, please check all this information. Yeah, and this is in my mind one of the most important. Why these temples all incorporate 27.3 and 108. Now, for instance, the size of the moon times 108 is the distance from the Earth to the moon. So many of these other temples incorporate the numbers 2953, 29.53 days in a synodic month. That's one orbit of the moon around the Earth in relation to the sun, Earth, and moon, and that's where the 400 to 400 ratio comes into the eclipse. So we see the synodic month and the sidereal month of 27.3 days are just so beautifully, harmoniously, perfectly bloody linked, and that they're incorporated into all these ancient structures, all these modern structures, and basically anything even remotely connected to Theosophy, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, Druids, Oddfellows, incorporates these numbers into them. So one of the things always in my mind is this some sort of echo? Is it in our DNA? But that it's used specifically in these buildings by these specific architects connected to the specific organisation that it reoccurs. It has to be part of a plan, something that's being passed on, something that's known to those who know about the Quadrivium, and then for the rest of us schmucks who were raised in the servile class, so to say, and we're given the classical dumbed down education, and we're at the mercy of gatekeepers who aggressively promote a very certain view of history, a very certain view of science, maths, and that all these disciplines should be separated, as where the Quadrivium brings them all together. And, well, this is pointing at something that these weights and measure systems are, and again, not just weights and measures of length, but measures of pressure, of temperature, geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, phi, the golden ratio, time, are all here. And what's more, okay, this is the entry point, and this is again, happy to bring you this information, because it all just comes together, and it goes to my hypotheses on the Great Pyramid itself, that each corner is different. Each corner has a specific meaning, whether it's measurement, geometry, proportion.
And all of this keeps strengthening my hypothesis in regards to the Great Pyramid, because, as so often is pointed out, it does have a very close approximation of phi and pi at the ideal measures of 440 by 280, but the Great Pyramid itself is not exactly that on each side has a slight variation. So, for instance, it's not exactly 756 feet on the southern side. It's an inch longer than that, but each side is vary slightly between 1 to a few inches short of 756 feet. But instead of ignoring these, if you actually include them, each side, each corner has a specific meaning. So the southeast corner represents proportions, perfect proportions, phi and pi squared. The axis there on the eastern side is a perfect phi, as where the south west corner represents perfect in meters, as where we move around the western axis, and the northwestern corner represents perfect geometry, and then we get to astronomy and time represented on the north and the northeast corners. Now this would also, of course, incorporate the medieval royal pendulum as well as the Indus Valley scale, because we include the sockets. So that's the map of the Great Pyramid, and I'm, I'm just getting more and more confident in regards to this, because the data tells the story. and all this data points to, well, for one thing, the pendulum, and that the proportion of the Great Pyramid is 86,400 to 1, not 43,200 to 1, because firstly it's inelegant, that version. It relies on a two-dimensional view of the pyramid from the top and from the side and from the top, but the pyramid, if we look at it three-dimensionally, we can extract so much more information. 86,400, very similar to 108, because it's also, well, just like 273. What do we get? We get a whole bunch of beautiful astronomy coming together and synchronizing with time as well, and of course the meter, the pendulum, and time. 108 is another example of this, and the 30-degree pendulum is 108,000 seconds, and if we look at it at 43,200, we don't see this. So I know it's, at some point, you have to learn to let go, and once we let go of this, we start getting all of this other stuff which connects between cultures, other Sumerian and the oldest Hindu stories. Again, 86,400 or 864 in the pendulum, the Vesica, and timekeeping, the various meters. So the meter that we all know, but including the meter created by the medieval royal foot or the ancient Agina feet, and this is all based on the most accurate, so whether it's the Petrie survey, the J.H. Cole and the Egyptian government survey, and this was reaffirmed later in 1981, and then again late with more recent laser surveys. Phi pi, we can get perfect from there rather than the 14 to 11 approximation, which is very, very nice, but that's an idealized system. And this method, again, now if we connect that with 273, what do we get? We get arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music, and in a very measurable, tangible sense, and well, again, all these other two-dimensional, three-dimensional geometry, the Indus scale, Sumerian scale, for instance, like the northwest corner, and again the medieval royal cube. It's just all here. It's all tangible. It's measurable, testable, observable, and it takes this much, much further. And also the excuse, for instance, I mentioned earlier that the eight-sided pyramid is described. The eight-sided pyramid, there are cracks on either side, and that's said to be the settling of the structure, at 90 degrees from each other on all four sides. Again, it's just ludicrous. And, well, again, so you've got to be a bit, measure, and the truth shall set you free, or the truth shall set you to 7 free, to be poetic about it. Anyway, with that, hope you enjoyed and have a good one. Again, get your rulers out and be as rigorous as you can, and, well, cheers.
It's the stuff they don't teach you in high school, or even undergrad university.